June 11th, 1962. Alcatraz Island. 3 empty beds, 3 papier-mâché heads resting on pillows, 3 men crawling through ventilation shafts above San Francisco Bay. By morning, the most secure prison in America will discover that the impossible just happened. Guards will find dummy heads so convincing they fooled hourly bed checks. They'll find widened ventilation grates, homemade tools, and a raft stitched together from raincoats. What they won't find are the bodies. Not that day. Not ever. The FBI will launch the most intensive manhunt in Bureau history. They'll drag the bay. They'll interview hundreds. They'll follow leads across 3 continents. And after decades of searching, the official conclusion will be drowning, presumed dead, except nobody can prove it. No confirmed remains. No definitive evidence. Just 3 men who walked into the night and vanished. If they drowned, where are the bodies? If they survived, how did 3 convicted felons pull off what the federal government said was impossible? And why does this escape, 60 years later, still haunt everyone who studies it? Because if these 3 men beat Alcatraz, they didn't just escape a prison, they beat a system designed specifically to be unbeatable. Alcatraz wasn't built to rehabilitate, it was built to contain. The island sits in the middle of San Francisco Bay, surrounded by freezing water, vicious currents, and a 1.5 miles of open ocean between it and the mainland. The water temperature hovers around 54 degrees, cold enough to induce hypothermia in under 30 minutes. The currents move fast enough to pull experienced swimmers miles off course. Even if an inmate somehow got off the island, the bay itself was the real prison. That was the entire point. When the federal government converted the military fortress into a maximum security penitentiary in 1934, they designed it around one principle: escape is physically impossible. The prison held America's most dangerous criminals, mob bosses, bank robbers, murderers, men who had escaped other prisons and needed somewhere they couldn't escape from. Al Capone did time here. George Machine Gun Kelly, Alvin Karpis. These weren't petty thieves. These were criminals the system had given up trying to reform. Alcatraz had one job: keep them inside until their sentences ended. Every detail reinforced that mission. Cells measured 5 feet by 9 feet. Concrete walls, steel bars, a single bed, a toilet, a sink. No privacy, no comfort. Guards conducted head counts 14 times a day. Metal detectors at every checkpoint. Tool inventories after every work shift. If a paintbrush went missing, the entire prison locked down until someone found it. The prison employed 1 guard for every 3 inmates, the highest ratio in the federal system. Guards worked rotating shifts so inmates couldn't predict patterns. Snitches were everywhere. Trust no one. Say nothing. The water surrounding the island wasn't just cold. It was psychologically devastating. Inmates could hear the city across the bay. Laughter from parties, car horns, foghorns from passing ships. Freedom was visible from every window, close enough to see clearly, impossible to reach. That proximity was intentional. It was designed to break you. And for 29 years, it worked. The Bureau of Prisons loved repeating one statistic. 36 men attempted escape in 14 separate incidents. 23 were caught. 6 were shot and killed. 2 drowned. 5 vanished and were presumed drowned. Nobody escaped Alcatraz. Nobody. Until Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers decided otherwise. Frank Morris arrived at Alcatraz in 1960. He was 34, convicted of bank robbery, and carrying a record that read like a masterclass in persistence. He'd escaped from prisons before. Louisiana State Penitentiary, a jail in Florida. He wasn't violent. He wasn't flashy. He was smart. His IQ tested at 133, placing him in the top 2% of the population. Guards who worked the cell block later described him as quiet, methodical, someone who watched and listened more than he talked. John and Clarence Anglin were brothers, bank robbers from Georgia, sentenced for robbing a bank in Alabama. They arrived at Alcatraz in 1960 and 1961. Like Morris, they had escape experience. They'd broken out of a Florida prison years earlier by hiding in a garbage truck. They were caught, sent to different facilities, then eventually routed to Alcatraz when authorities decided they needed tighter containment. The Anglins weren't geniuses. They were practical. They understood tools, materials, improvisation. They knew how to work with their hands and how to solve physical problems without blueprints or instructions. Morris and the Anglins ended up in adjacent cells on B Block. That proximity wasn't random, it was opportunity. And at some point in late 1961, they started talking. Not about innocence, not about appeals, about something far more dangerous. They started talking about the vents. Every cell in B Block had a ventilation grate at the back wall, about 6 inches by 9 inches, designed to circulate air. The grates were old, installed decades earlier when Alcatraz was a military prison. The concrete around them had been deteriorating for years. Nobody paid much attention because the grates were small, the shafts behind them narrow, and even if an inmate removed a grate, he'd still be trapped inside a utility corridor with nowhere to go. Except Morris and the Anglins realized something the guards hadn't. If you widened the vent opening enough to squeeze through, you could access the corridor. And if you accessed the corridor, you could climb to the roof. And if you reached the roof, you could reach the ground. And if you reached the ground, you could reach the water. The plan required precision. Widening the vents meant chipping away concrete without making noise, without leaving debris, and without getting caught during one of the 14 daily head counts. They needed tools. They scavenged. A spoon stolen from the cafeteria. A metal file smuggled from the workshop. Bits of broken saw blades. Anything sharp enough to scrape concrete. They worked at night, during music hour, when accordion performances and inmate chatter covered the sound of scraping. They worked in total darkness because lights out meant guards could see shadows through the bars. They worked inches at a time, night after night, collecting concrete dust in makeshift bags and flushing it down the toilet so morning inspections wouldn't reveal anything. Progress was agonizingly slow. Months passed. The vents widened, but only slightly, and they faced another problem. Even if they escaped their cells at night, even if they climbed through the corridor and reached the roof, guards would discover empty beds during the next head count. The escape would be over before it started. They needed time, hours ideally, enough to get off the island before anyone noticed. That's when Morris came up with the dummy heads, using materials stolen over months, raincoat scraps, soap, toilet paper, concrete dust for color. They sculpted crude busts of their own faces. They added hair, real hair, stolen from the prison barbershop, and glued strand by strand onto the papier-mâché forms. They painted features, eyebrows, stubble, shadows. The heads weren't perfect. Up close, in daylight, they looked fake. But from a distance, in dim light, through cell bars during a nighttime bed check, they looked close enough. Good enough to buy hours. A fourth inmate, Alan West, worked with them. His cell was near theirs. He helped gather materials, helped plan, but on the night of the escape, his vent wouldn't open. He'd fallen behind on widening it, and when the moment came, he couldn't squeeze through. Morris and the Anglins couldn't wait. They left without him. West stayed behind, and the next day, he told investigators everything. That's how we know most of what happened. June 11th, 1962. Lights out at 9:30 p.m. Morris and the Anglins placed the dummy heads on their pillows, tucked blankets around them, and slipped through the widened vents into the utility corridor. They climbed pipes to the roof, squeezed through another vent, and emerged onto the cell block roof under open sky. From there, they climbed down a drain pipe to the ground, crossed the island to the northeast shore, and reached the water. They carried a raft, improvised from more than 50 raincoats stolen and stitched together over months. They'd made crude paddles. They'd made life vests from the same raincoat material. Everything about the raft was improvised, untested, and wildly optimistic. Whether it floated well, whether it stayed inflated, whether it could survive the bay currents, nobody knew. They inflated it using a modified accordion, another item stolen from the music room. Then, they pushed into the water and disappeared. The next morning, guards discovered the dummy heads. Alcatraz went into immediate lockdown. The FBI launched a massive search. Coast Guard boats swept the bay. Helicopters scanned the coastline. Agents interviewed inmates, analyzed the escape route, calculated tides and currents. The official theory came together quickly. The raft failed. The water was 54 degrees. The currents were brutal. The men drowned. Case closed. Except the evidence didn't fully support that conclusion. Searchers found pieces of the raft washed ashore weeks later. They found a paddle, They found a wallet belonging to Clarence Anglin floating near Alcatraz, but no bodies. Ever. The bay gives up drowning victims. Always. Currents push them to shore within days. But Morris and the Anglins never surfaced. The FBI kept the case open for 17 years. Agents tracked reported sightings across the country. A man matching Morris's description in South America. Someone resembling the Anglins in Georgia. Tips flooded in, none confirmed. In 1979, the Bureau officially closed the investigation, concluding the men drowned. But doubts lingered. In 2013, the Anglin family came forward with a photograph allegedly taken in 1975, showing two men who looked remarkably like John and Clarence, older but recognizable. The U.S. Marshals Service analyzed it. Inconclusive. In 2015, the History Channel obtained a letter allegedly written by John Anglin in 2013, claiming all three survived. The letter offered to turn himself in for medical treatment in exchange for a short sentence. The Marshals investigated. Inconclusive. Forensic analysis couldn't definitively confirm or rule out authenticity. And so the mystery endures. If they drowned, why no bodies? If they survived, why no confirmed sightings, no arrests, no slip-ups in 60 years? Raft, 3 convicted criminals vanish completely and stay vanished for 6 decades? That level of discipline seems almost impossible. But so does widening a vent with a spoon and fooling guards with a papier-mâché head. What we know for certain is this. The escape itself succeeded. Morris and the Anglins got off the island. They beat the security, the head counts, the tool inventories, the metal detectors. They exploited a weakness nobody thought mattered. They turned garbage into survival gear. They spent 6 months preparing, working in total darkness, one scrape at a time. And on the night it mattered, they executed. Whether they reached the mainland is a different question. The bay was freezing. The currents were vicious. The raft was homemade. Survival required not just luck, but near-perfect conditions. Calm water, favorable tides. Physical endurance beyond what most humans possess. The odds were terrible, but the odds of escaping Alcatraz were also terrible. And they did that. Some investigators believe they made it. A former FBI agent who worked the case said years later that he thought they survived the first night, reached land somewhere north of the Golden Gate, and vanished into the population. Others remain convinced the bay killed them and the bodies sank or were pulled out to sea. Both theories have evidence. Neither has proof. And that's what makes this escape different from every other prison break in American history. It's not just that they got out. It's that we still don't know what happened next. The ambiguity is the legacy. Alcatraz closed in 1963, 1 year after the escape. The prison was too expensive to maintain. And the Morris Anglin breakout had humiliated the Bureau of Prisons. The escape that couldn't happen had happened. And even if the inmates drowned, the fact that they got off the island at all shattered the myth of Alcatraz as escape-proof. Today, the island is a tourist attraction. Visitors walk through the cell block, see the dummy heads in a museum display, peer into the cells where Morris and the Anglins chipped away at concrete night after night. The story has been romanticized, turned into movies, documentaries, legends. But strip away the mythology and what remains is something far more unsettling. 3 men with basic tools, limited resources, and no formal engineering training dismantled a system designed by experts to be impenetrable. They didn't overpower it, they outthought it. And whether they lived or died in the bay, they proved something the federal government spent 29 years trying to deny. Alcatraz wasn't unbeatable. It just required patience, planning, and a willingness to risk everything on a single night. The question that haunts investigators, historians, and anyone who studies this case isn't really whether they survived. It's simpler and harder than that. If you were Frank Morris, treading water in the freezing darkness of San Francisco Bay, with the lights of the city glowing ahead and the island disappearing behind you, what would you do next? And if you made it, how long could you stay gone?